I wrote down, folks, permission to ignore convention. Charles, that's worth the entire conversation. I'm telling you, that's huge, because now we've got to go from, so anger does that for us. I'll tell you what else does that for us is fear, that fight or flight.
Yeah.
You know, you think about creativity is when your life is on the line. We read these amazing heroic stories. You talk about creative and innovative. I mean, the humans, the brain takes over and you're going, I got to survive. I got to come up with something.
My back is against the wall.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting though, is that it raises this next question, which is, okay, so if I'm going to give myself permission to ignore convention, then how should I use convention? Like, what is the role of convention in my life? And that actually gets us to the thing you'd asked about before, which is these innovation brokers.
Yes.
So why do some people seem more creative than others? What do we know about people who are judged by their peers to be innovative? Well, what we know about them is not necessarily that they have an artistic sensibility or that they enjoyed building Legos more as a kid. What we do know is that people who are most creative, they tend two things. First of all, not necessarily to see themselves as creative people, but they tend to see creativity not as an act of expression, but as an import-export business, taking ideas from one realm and bringing them into a new setting. And this is where convention comes up, because what is convention? What is a conventional idea? A conventional idea is an idea that is almost a cliche, because every time there's one kind of problem, someone brings out an old idea to solve it.
Yep.
But what innovation brokers do is they take that old idea and they say, look, I'm not going to use it to solve the same problem it's always solved. Instead, I'm going to drag it into a new setting. One of my favorite examples of this is the making of the movie Frozen, right? Everyone knows the movie Frozen. And so why was Frozen so creative? Why was it so successful? It's not because everyone working on it was so artistic. It's because for months and months and months, they struggled with trying to figure out what Frozen should be about, how the plot should go. And in fact, they were literally months from that movie being released and on the brink of catastrophe, because they didn't know how to end the movie. They didn't know how to put it together. And so they had this big meeting. They brought everyone from working on the movie into one room, and they sat them down and they said, look, let's all go around and just throw out ideas that you like. Any idea at all. Doesn't matter how stale it is, doesn't matter how new. So they go around the table and a bunch of people say, well, look, we're Disney, right? We make princess movies. We know princesses better than anything else. So one thing this movie should be about is princesses. Cliched idea, right? Yep. Every Disney movie is about a princess. But they say, look, we are the princess company. Then they go around and they say, okay, look, let's find another idea. And so they go around. And what's interesting about Frozen is there was an unusually large number of women working on that project. In fact, the first female director in Disney's history was the co-director of Frozen. And so they're going around the table, and a bunch of people working on the film, particularly women, say, you know what's interesting to me? Sisterhood. Like there's a ton of books about sisterhood, right? There's Russian novels about sisterhood, there's teen novels about sisterhood, but like sisters are just kind of interesting, right? A little cliched in the literature, but they're interesting. I have a sister. Sisters, there's usually not like a good sister and a bad sister. Usually it's sisters grow together and they grow apart. And so one of the people working on the film, he says, look, what if we were to just take these two ideas, princesses and sisters, and smash them together? And all of a sudden it opened up all these creative possibilities, right? What if the sisters, the princesses, were to save each other?
Yeah.
If you do that, then the prince doesn't have to save the princess, because the sisters are going to save each other. But now that means that we can make the prince the villain. But we don't need to reveal the prince as the villain till the very end of the movie. This is Frozen. This is why it became such a hit, because why it seemed so creative, not because it was brand new, but because it took these two old cliched ideas and it mixed them together in a new way. And any business owner can do the same thing. If they need that creative boost, if they need to figure out how do I get beyond convention, sometimes the answer is you take convention, you take a couple pieces of convention, and you just put them together in new ways, and it seems brand new.
That's exactly right, because convention, we're not saying throw it out. That's not the deal. There's a reason why it became convention. It had its merits. It works on some level. But that's true innovation. Exactly right. That's what you're saying. That's true innovation. Is sometimes it is the total new idea, but most of the time it's a mix.
That's exactly right. One of my favorite examples of this actually is I was talking to a design firm who had been in business in the 1990s, and they had gotten this assignment to develop a new kind of helmet for kids, right? And up to that point, everything that you could buy for a kid, like a safety helmet, was like, looked like a motorcycle helmet or a football helmet, nothing a kid would ever wear. And so they go out and they hire this guy. It's the middle of the winter in Rhode Island. They hire this guy who's a boat builder. And he actually got hired just because he was like friends with the boss of the firm. And he comes in and it's the middle of the winter. He's not building any boats. Nobody wants to work with this guy, right? Because like he doesn't know anything about design. And so they give him this dog of a project, the helmet project. And within the first week of being there, he comes in and he says, the way that you build a boat is you build all these ribs first along the hull, and then you kind of like fill in the rest of the boat with wood. And the reason you do that is because that way, if a boat hits a rock, it distributes the force of the impact.
Right.
And he said, what if I was to build a boat hull the size of someone's head? And that's the invention of the bicycle helmet.
Wow.
Right? You own one of these. Everyone listening to this owns one of these. It's one of the best-selling products in the last 40 years. And the reason it was invented is because they hired a boat builder to build a boat for someone's head. That's where innovation comes from, not from a burst of genius or creativity. It comes from someone taking an old idea and putting it in a new setting.
Okay, so that is such a great setup. So we've talked about innovation brokers. And I'm going to use your words here. I'm going to let you teach out of this. I want to give the full sentence and let you kind of walk through each of these, let's say, skills that innovation brokers have. Now, the reason I'm asking you this, Charles, is because we've got people listening going, okay, great, I get all this. This is exciting. How do I find these people? And here's what you say. Innovation brokers are the people most skilled at taking existing information, answers, and resources and applying them as solutions to new problems. So you gave us a great example. Here's a guy that builds boats and he goes, all right, I'll take how I build boats and what if I build a helmet that way? So we get that, but how do our small business leaders, these owners, CEOs, managers, how do they best identify those skills? What are they looking for beyond those skills? Or just walk us through what these people might be looking like, acting like in their professional role, right there under our noses.
There's kind of two characteristics. And the interesting thing is that I'm sure small business owners listening to this, that they're innovation brokers themselves. They probably have that ability to take conventional ideas and see them in new ways. But there's two things that we have found that innovation brokers do exceptionally well, habits, if you will. The first is that they tend to be curious. They tend to just indulge their curiosity about learning about things that are outside their main wheelhouse, right? They read history books. They go into the accounting department and they ask the accountants to explain what's going on. When they meet someone on the bus, they ask them questions about their job. They're curious and they allow themselves to indulge their curiosity. But that on its own is not enough because lots of people are curious. The second thing that innovation brokers do is they tend to have daily or weekly routines, rituals almost, that allow them to think more deeply about what they've been exposed to. Right. So for some people, it means that like they keep a diary and they write down sort of what they saw that day and how to make sense of it. Or they write letters or emails to their friends, or they pull in their assistant and they say, hey, let me tell you about this thing I learned today. Or they say, hey, I read this interesting article. Let me tell you what it said. And the reason they're doing that is not to educate the person that they're speaking to, right? It's to force themselves to think more deeply about the ideas that they were just exposed to. I do this myself every day. When I come home from work, I tell my wife about my day in excruciating detail. Not because she is interested. She is bored to tears hearing about my day. But I'm not telling her for her benefit. I'm making her listen to me for my benefit. Because as I tell her what I did that day and sort of how to make sense of it, did I do this right or did I do it wrong? As I go through that process, it forces me to think more deeply about my day and whether I used my time wisely, what ideas I was exposed to that I could use in other settings. Now, hopefully she's not totally bored by it because hopefully she's at least a little bit interested in what happens to me in my life.
Sure.
But this is the point, is that the people who are most successful, the people who are most innovative, and we know this from productivity studies, are the people who build habits into their life that allow them to think more deeply. Think more deeply about the choices they're making, think more deeply about the ideas they're getting exposed to. That's how you succeed. Productivity is not about being busy. It's about, in some respects, slowing down so you can think more deeply.